Nobody warns you about the ordinary. We spend our lives braced for disaster, the diagnosis, the crash, the collapse, while the actual forces reshaping our future move so slowly we never notice them at all. They don't interrupt your day. They are your day. And by the time they show up as a result, a body that gives out too early, a life that never quite launched, a version of yourself you don't recognize, it feels sudden. It wasn't sudden. It was accumulating the entire time, in plain sight, disguised as nothing in particular. There are 3 places where this quiet accumulation happens: inside your mind, inside your body, and inside the direction of your life. Neglect any one of them long enough, and it will eventually drag the other 2 down with it. This isn't a theory, it's a pattern you can watch play out in almost anyone's life, once you know where to look. Part 1. What you feed your mind. Start with the mind, because everything else is downstream of it. Picture 2 people standing in front of the exact same opportunity. One sees a reason to try. The other sees 5 reasons it won't work. Same opportunity, same information, completely different lives ahead of them. The difference isn't intelligence. It's a set of quiet mental habits that most people never examine, because nobody ever sat them down and named them. The first is drifting, not failing, drifting. Showing up without really showing up, giving 60% and calling it effort. Drifting is dangerous precisely because it feels safe. Nothing is technically going wrong, so there's nothing to fix. But a life you're proud of doesn't happen by current. A boat with no power doesn't drift upstream. It goes wherever the water decides to take it, and calls that a destination. The second is hesitation dressed up as wisdom, endless deliberation that never turns into a decision. It feels responsible. I'm just being careful. But past a certain point, staying on the fence is itself a choice. The choice to let time decide for you instead of deciding for yourself. Talk to anyone who has actually built something worth building, and they'll tell you the same uncomfortable truth. Most of their early calls were wrong, and it barely mattered, because a wrong decision, made and corrected, teaches you more in a month than 10 years of careful non-decisions ever could. The third is doubt, specifically the kind you turn on yourself. Not can this work, but can I make this work? This one is corrosive because it doesn't just slow you down, it talks you out of starting in the first place. And here's the part nobody likes to hear. You will never significantly outperform the private story you believe about yourself. Change what you feed that story, the evidence, the small proofs, the wins you actually let yourself count, and eventually the story itself starts to shift. The fourth is worry, which is not the same thing as concern. Concern moves you toward a decision. Worry just replays the same imagined disaster on a loop and calls it thinking. It produces no plans, no action, nothing but where. People who've genuinely broken a long-standing worry habit will tell you it wasn't a single insight that did it. It was a decision, repeated daily, sometimes for the better part of a year, to stop rehearsing catastrophes that hadn't happened yet, and in most cases, never would. The fifth is treating risk as optional, as if playing it safe were actually safe. It never was. The moment you were born, risk became the baseline condition of being alive. You don't get to opt out of risk. You only get to choose which risks you're willing to take. Standing still has a cost too. It just arrives quietly, years later, as regret, instead of loudly, right away, as failure. Regret is simply the invoice for risks you refuse to take, delivered late. Underneath all 5 of these sits one deeper habit, what you allow into your mind every single day without questioning it. Most people are far more careful about what they put into their bodies than what they put into their heads. They'd never eat something visibly spoiled, yet they'll spend an hour scrolling through outrage, comparison, and manufactured urgency and call it just relaxing. Whatever you feed your attention repeatedly becomes the raw material your brain uses to build your expectations, your confidence, and eventually, your results. Guard that input the way you'd guard anything else your life actually depends on. Part 2. What you feed your body. Now move to the body, because the sharpest mind in the world can only take you as far as your health allows it to go. Here's what almost nobody tells you during a routine checkup. The conditions that eventually land people in a hospital bed rarely arrive from one bad decision. They accumulate through choices so unremarkable that most people never connect them to the outcome. Nobody develops serious metabolic disease from a single bad meal. They develop it from years of small, invisible defaults, repeated without a second thought. Take movement. You can train hard for an hour a day and still be, in every meaningful sense, sedentary if the other 15 waking hours are spent sitting in a car, at a desk, and on a couch. The body wasn't built for one intense burst, followed by hours of stillness. It was built for frequent, low-level movement scattered across the whole day. Walking, standing, carrying things, taking the stairs. Skip that, and your muscles stop efficiently pulling sugar out of your bloodstream, no matter how disciplined your gym routine looks on paper. Take where your weight actually sits, not just how much of it there is. A number on a scale can look perfectly normal, while fat quietly gathers around your organs, functioning less like stored energy and more like an inflamed, hormone-releasing tissue. It interferes with insulin, strains the liver, and nudges blood pressure upward, all without producing a single symptom you'd notice. A far more honest number than total body weight is your waist measured against your height. Keep your waist under half your height, and you've got a simple, genuinely useful early warning system that most people have never even heard of. Take blood pressure, famous for causing no symptoms right up until it causes an irreversible one. Every point it sits above normal is quietly injuring the lining of your arteries, one imperceptible scar at a time, for years, long before anyone actually feels a thing. Take what you're putting into your body in the first place. Foods engineered to override your natural sense of fullness, stripped of the fiber that would have told your brain, that's enough. Simply get eaten in quantities nothing in nature was ever built to produce. And liquid sugar deserves its own warning, because your body doesn't register calories you drink the same way it registers calories you chew. They don't replace a meal, they just get added on top of it, meal after meal, for years, while your liver quietly absorbs the overflow. Take sleep, still treated by most people as the most negotiable line item on the to-do list, when it's actually when your body performs its most essential repair work. Cut it short consistently, and your hunger hormones shift, your sensitivity to insulin drops, and your body starts mishandling meals it used to process just fine the week before. Take stress, not the short, sharp kind that focuses you for a moment, but the kind that never fully switches off. That kind keeps stress hormones elevated for months or years at a time, and elevated stress hormones don't just make you feel tense. They physically redirect fat storage toward your midsection, raise your blood sugar, and quietly suppress your immune system the entire time, without ever announcing themselves. And take the things that seem too minor to matter. Fiber intake most people never come close to meeting, oral health that seems purely cosmetic, but is tied to inflammation that travels well beyond the mouth, and cardiovascular fitness, which long-term research now ranks among the single strongest predictors of how long you'll live, ahead of many conditions doctors treat with far more urgency. None of these, on its own, is dramatic. That is exactly the point. None of them feels like danger. They feel like an ordinary Tuesday. Part 3. Where you're actually headed. The third place accumulation happens is in the direction of your life itself, not what you believe, not how healthy you are, but what you're actually building, day after day, whether or not you ever consciously decided to build it. Most people never choose their direction. They inherit it, from family expectations, from whatever felt urgent this particular week, from the path that happened to require the least resistance. And because nobody ever handed them a real moment to stop and ask, is this actually where I want to end up? They wake up years later having constructed something they never designed in the first place. A starting point for changing that is recognizing how much genuinely sits inside your control. Not everything. The economy isn't yours to command, and neither is a stranger's opinion of you. But your effort, your attitude, how you treat the people in front of you, and where you point your energy today are entirely yours. People who spend their energy on what they can't influence tend to lose influence over time. People who spend it on what they actually can influence tend to gain more of it. That isn't a motivational slogan. It's simply how attention and effort compound in either direction. From there comes the harder question. Toward what, exactly? Without a clear picture of the life you're actually trying to build, you default to optimizing for whatever feels loudest in the moment, and urgency and importance are rarely the same thing. The things that would genuinely change your life 5 years out, your health, your relationships, your skills, your finances, almost never scream for attention today. They just sit there quietly compounding, while louder, less important things eat your calendar one interruption at a time. And once you actually know what you're building, you'll find you need other people to help you build it, which means learning that most relationships aren't the competition you were quietly trained to believe they were. The people who create the most lasting success are rarely the ones who won at someone else's expense. They're the ones who found a way for both sides to come out ahead, and who were willing to walk away from a deal rather than force a win that cost the other person too much. That kind of trust isn't built in a single conversation. It's built the same way everything else in this script gets built, deposit by deposit, day by day, until it's substantial enough to hold weight when it's tested. Closing. The same mechanism, two directions. None of this, the mental habits, the physical ones, the direction you're pointed in, ever announces itself as urgent. That's the trap. There's no alarm for a mind slowly filling with doubt, no siren for a waistline slowly expanding, no warning bell for a decade spent quietly building someone else's version of your life. The damage and the progress both happen in exactly the same silence. Which means the responsibility sits entirely with you to check in on what you're thinking, what you're consuming, how you're moving, and where you're actually headed before that silence resolves into a result you never chose. The good news, and it is genuinely good news, is that every single one of these is trainable. None of it is fixed. None of it is fate. You don't need to overhaul all of it this week. That's not how compounding works in either direction. Pick one habit in one of these three areas and improve it slightly. Then, once that one holds, pick another. The exact same mechanism that quietly builds a wasted decade can just as quietly build an extraordinary one. It's the same machine, running the same process, on the same daily inputs. The only real question left is which direction you're willing to point it, starting today.